Hi everyone and welcome back to Story of the World Highlights. Today we'll be looking at chapter 12. We're already on chapter 12. And this chapter had a lot happening in England. A lot of English history happened. So to make this video not too long, I have decided to only focus on the Cromwell Protectorate and the goodbye of Charles I all the way to the welcome Charles II. Okay? That means that the Great Fire of London and the Black Plague, or the Big Bubonic Plague, I will not be discussing in this video. Simply, one of them is the plague, in which people were infected by disease caused by rats, and everyone got it, and everyone was dying. The other one is the Great Fire, is that buildings were made of wood in England, and they were all really close, and a baker's oven didn't fully turn off, and a spark caught its house on fire for the bakery, and it kept spreading until almost all of London was burned down. If you would like to know more information about those events, you can see our links for additional video content below in the caption. But again, I'm going to just focus on everything from the goodbye of Charles I to the hello of Charles II. Okay? So let's get started. Charles I is the son of James I, okay? So we have James I, who you remember was Mary, Queen of Scots' son. So Charles I is his son, and Charles, just like his dad, believed that he was given the power by God to be there and to be the ruler. And Charles, he decided to marry a Catholic woman, which the people of England were not too thrilled about. Remember, they're Protestant, and they're very fearful of Catholic influence. So they weren't too thrilled. Also, because Charles thought that God made him in charge, he demanded lots of things. And he wanted money, and he wanted things done his way. But Parliament, which is a governing group of elected people and has been around since the 1200s in England, this group, Parliament, said, no, you can't just have things the way you want. That's not how this works. And he didn't like that. So the monarchy at the time, the king, he had the power to dismiss Parliament. And dismiss means no more Parliament, no more working. And he did this for 11 years. No Parliament. That hadn't been done in a long time. And when this was happening, Charles was making so many rules against Catholics. He was, not being a great guy. People started to hate him more and more. He was forcing the Scottish people to use an English language book only for church, and they weren't thrilled about that. So he was making lots of enemies. Finally, he ran out of money. That's right here. He ran out of money and said, Parliament, you want to come back and approve a budget for me so I can have more money? And they were like, fine. And they came back, but they didn't follow his rules. And they didn't dismiss when he wanted them to dismiss. Instead, they stayed there for 8 years, and this was called Long Parliament because the members in Parliament during this time, they didn't change like they normally do. And so this was known as Long Parliament time. Now, during Long Parliament's time, we had two groups in Parliament right here. We had the Puritans and the other guys, the non-Puritans. And the Puritans and non-Puritans, they both agreed that Charles should not have so much power, but they didn't agree on much else. So they kept fighting all the time, and nothing was getting done. And Charles said, I think this is because of the Puritans. And remember, Puritans are Protestant, but they're against the Church of England because if you remember from learning about the Mayflower, the Pilgrims and everyone, they didn't like the current religion and Church of England because it wasn't pure enough. It still had a little too much Catholicness to it. So these Puritans were not, getting along with the non-Puritans. And Charles said, I think this is because of the Puritans that nothing's getting done. So he decided to secretly bring 500 soldiers to Parliament to arrest the top leaders of the Puritan side. But somebody tipped them off. And so they weren't there the next day. And what all of the people in England saw is they said, wow, Charles was going to send an army against his own people? He must be stopped. And this was sort of the big moment that people were like, yeah, no more, no more. So with that, we had Charles knowing a rebellion was coming, and he didn't want to be captured by all of these different Puritan groups in Parliament. So he decided to run away. Bye-bye, Charles. And Puritans took over Parliament, and their commander, their leader, was this man named Oliver Cromwell. Now, this started a civil war in England, and so you had the Puritans who supported the Puritan takeover of Parliament, called the Roundheads. They were called Roundheads because of their haircut. And the Roundheads, plus the Scottish, who also didn't like the king, were going against the people that supported the king, and those were the Cavaliers. So we have here, oh, we love the king. And over here, no more king. Okay? And finally, at the Battle of Marston Moor, and Moor just means meadow. At that battle, Cromwell won, the Puritans won, and they put Charles in jail and eventually voted to kill him. R.I.P. Charles I. Now, they had this new parliament called the Rump Parliament. And the Rump Parliament lasted for a while, and they created what is the Cromwell Protectorate. So during this time, we had all of Parliament saying, oh, we still need a leader. How about we make Cromwell our leader? So he spoke for a lot of the people. And Cromwell called this the Commonwealth. And what Commonwealth means is it means a democracy-style government, so that people are representing other people by vote. You vote on who you want to represent you. And he called it the Commonwealth. And the difference between Commonwealth and democracy is that a Commonwealth is the democracy with a bunch of countries together. So we have Scotland and England together. So they were working together to make sure there was democracy, thus the name Commonwealth. And during this time, the Commonwealth was still making some decisions. They were still arguing, and nothing was getting done. So Cromwell, he said, things aren't getting done. Let's just have the Parliament members leave, dismiss them, and I will put in my own people that will get things done. Now, you might be thinking, he is dismissing people? He's putting in the only people he wants. And to dismiss people, he even sent in troops to kick them out, which is kind of like what Charles did with his 500 troops. So what's the difference? Cromwell thought, I'm doing what God wants. But didn't Charles also think that he was doing what God wants? And this new government that was handpicked by Cromwell was called the Bare Bones Parliament. It was called the Bare Bones Parliament because one of the ministers that Cromwell selected, his last name was Bare Bones. And instead of being called king, he ended up calling himself Lord Protector of England. And he moved his family into the royal palace, and he lived there and ruled and made rules against people who weren't Puritans. He used lots of Puritan rules as law. And he decided to destroy Catholic churches, and it was just not a great time. And the people of England were starting to not like him. They're like, there's not much difference between a monarchy and this protectorate. The protectorate is the same thing, but with just more rules. So they weren't a fan. And when Cromwell died, his son took the title of Lord Protector of England, but the people, they were like, no, let's move on. And what they did is they held a secret parliament with our original parliament from Long Parliament, remember? They held a secret meeting, and they decided to send a letter to Charles I's son, who was hiding in France. And they said, please come back. Please, we need a king. And so they invited Charles back, and Charles II became king. And this time, Parliament made sure to include some laws that kept them more in power.